welcome to ICICIdirect. Today, we are in an exclusive conversation with Taher Badshah, Chief Investment Officer, Equities at Invesco India Mutual Fund. Taher joins us to talk about the Invesco India Flexicap Fund NFO that opens the 24th of January and closes on the 7th of Feb 2022. Thank you, Taher, for joining us today on the show. Let's start by talking about the changes in business environment that are inevitable. Equity markets are also unpredictable. In such a market scenario, how do we plan our mutual fund investments to achieve our investment objectives?
I think we have all of us have been actually seeing our lives and livelihoods being significantly affected and transforming over a period of time. Primarily induced by technology and innovation, which has resulted in business conditions around many corporates and enterprises changing remarkably over the last few decades, and the pace has only accelerated on account of the pandemic that we have seen over the last 2 years, which has brought in its own complexities and variabilities. So basically, I think the premise that we are essentially working with is that it's going to be a VUCA world, and it's going to be reasonably complex in terms of investing as well. And I think it is important, therefore, that we have as much of flexibility at our end as investors in order to be able to counter these kind of variabilities. So that's the reason why we are going by this theme that look, we need flexibility, not necessarily only from the point of view of market cap, but we are essentially taking flexibility to a whole new level, where we are talking about having the nimble-footedness to be able to kind of identify the winners, which are probably going to come about in a world which is going to be reasonably disrupted.
You've already mentioned a little bit about why it's so important to be nimble-footed in the current market conditions, but why should a Flexicap fund be part of a core investment portfolio?
So we've identified a couple of 3 or 4 reasons where we think a Flexicap fund makes sense from a core investment portfolio perspective. First off, of course, it offers that flexibility, and basically Flexicap funds can pursue opportunities across the market cap range and sectors. The second thing which a Flexicap fund offers is the dynamic nature of that fund. It aims to capture stability of large caps and growth potential of mid and small caps, with an option to even dynamically change that allocation over a period of time. The third is that you're not constrained by regulatory reasons, which sometimes come in the way of long-term ownership of certain stocks or certain businesses. Many a times, you are required to make those changes to your portfolio, or sometimes give up on certain businesses because they have probably moved from one market cap bucket to another. That need not necessarily come in the way of a Flexicap fund, and therefore, to that extent, it facilitates the longevity of stock ownership, as the fund does not need to necessarily rebalance the portfolio due to market cap changes. And last but not the least is also the diversification which it helps to generate, which in our view, therefore, on an aggregate basis over a more medium to longer term, can lead to a relatively more balanced risk-reward profile for the investors compared to probably other combinations of funds. So we believe that a combination of flexibility, dynamic nature of the fund, the fact that it promotes longer-term ownership and diversification are a few of the key reasons why we think a Flexicap fund has its own superiority.
Right. Taher, what is the investment strategy approach of Invesco India Flexicap Fund NFO?
Well, so the Invesco India Flexicap NFO will of course be supported by the bedrock investment framework and investment philosophy of Invesco India Mutual Fund, and to that extent, we will be running it with the same rigor and the same investment framework that we use for all of our other funds as well. Um, what we are basically, the investment approach for the Flexicap fund is essentially going to be revolving around three levers, one being stock selection, the other being sector allocation, and the third being, of course, market cap bias, which is obviously the central premise of the fund. Within stock selection, again, we are basically trying to define ways we will go about selecting bottom up opportunities. So we are looking at a combination of high growth companies, high quality companies, and turnaround companies from a stock selection approach to constitute the portfolio of the FlexiCap fund. Um, High growth companies and high quality companies and turnaround companies are once again all are determined on the basis of certain hard metrics. We're looking at future growth opportunities and ability of assessing ability of companies to grow at a certain minimum rate of growth, say 15% on either revenue or operating earnings or profits over the next few years. Whereas in case of high quality companies, they will be identified on the basis of what they have been able to deliver in the past few years, particularly on the metric of profitability. And when we are looking at turnaround opportunities, we are essentially trying to look at companies which have commenced a journey of a turnaround, where we have seen a few quarters where companies have started to generate incremental margins or incremental profitability, which is better than what it has been in the past. So we have set very well-defined parameters which will allow us to identify individual stocks or identify those winners in each of the three buckets when we talk about stock selection. When we come to sector allocation, which is the other lever that we would like to deploy, basically we do not necessarily start with the proposition of having a sector bias, but the fund will follow a mix of top-down and bottom-up approach. But the idea will basically be, once again, here to have a mix of sectors, some which are basically structural growth sectors, those which have got structural growth drivers in place. There could be certain sectors which are attractively positioned on a relative risk-reward basis. And the third would be sectors which probably have cyclical tailwinds. So our sector, dispersion essentially will try to capture these three opportunities. And lastly, when it comes to market cap bias, which is the third and the most important lever that the fund is configured around, basically we will once again here be using a combination of relative valuations along with economic activity indicators, business cycle indicators, macroeconomic indicators, in order to assess as to what should be a split between large caps, mid caps, and small caps. Valuations, of course, becomes central and the most important and objective starting point. But we do not want to look at valuations only in isolation. We want to look at determining a market cap bias also by simultaneously, measuring them against where we are in the economic cycle, whether it is a global economic cycle or the domestic economic cycle. We think indicators such as liquidity and interest rates, besides economic activity indicators, also alongside will give a very good perspective in terms of how we should position ourselves on the market cap curve. So basically, these are the three levers: stock selection, sector allocation, and market cap bias, which together will constitute the framework for the FlexiCap.
Right. Taher, very lastly, then who, in your opinion, should be looking at investing in a FlexiCap fund?
Well, I think clearly it is meant for investors which who are aiming for long-term wealth creation, and investors who are looking to build a core equity portfolio, a diversified equity portfolio, which is flexible enough in order to counter the emerging market conditions, and allow us to capture that variability that we expect will come about in businesses and the markets as well.
Right. Thanks for that, Taher. It was great talking to you today on the show. Just to recap for our viewers, the Invesco India Flexicap Fund, NFO, opens on the 24th of January and closes on the 7th of Feb 2022. Thank you, Taher. Great talking to you today on the show.
Thank you very much.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to never miss an update from ICICI Direct.